I've really centered everything I do around having a very intentional hiring process. I think this is a place that a lot of companies go wrong. They interview by feel. They have lots of overlap in their interview process, so it's very really inefficient.
Hi, I'm your host today for another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. My name is Brett, and I am here with Jason Lalk. Jason is the founder of Remote Growth Partners. They specialize in uh, helping companies put together an offshore marketing team, basically offshore agency talent, and he's doing great. They are growing fast and helping lots of businesses find very reasonably priced talent, great talent in other parts of the world. Jason, why don't you tell us a little bit about Remote Growth Partners and we'll jump into our interview.
Yeah, awesome to be here today. So, Remote Growth Partners or RGP, we everyone knows that you can save money hiring offshore talent, but the big difference is can you find really high quality talent? And a lot of us have had like heard horror stories of um, offshore talent, people in India or Philippines that didn't work out. And my contention is that those people just weren't vetted well enough or interviewed strongly enough. And so we put a big emphasis on our recruitment process. And what we do is we help companies hire full time offshore talent. And whether that we will manage some of those people for them in like a managed service model on like a monthly basis, which for some companies is a massive unlock because their executives get a bunch of time back. So they don't have to manage these folks as much. And some people will just do a direct hire um, but a bit different than a traditional kind of like recruiting agency, and the fact that most agencies will charge based on a percentage of base salary. I spent a decade in the recruitment world, and I think that model is a bit broken because then we as the agency are only incentivized to try to get someone with a higher salary. So instead, we just figure out how difficult we think the role is for us, how niche the role is, and we set a fixed price there. And so no matter what, that's the only price that you're paying for that role. And we've had a lot of success with that as well. But yeah, there is some amazing talent offshore, and I think that was over my startup career. One of my big reflections and lessons was that I would rather hire a core group of A players domestically that I can trust and can that don't need much management, and then try to build a flexible workforce as needed underneath that.
All right, and I butchered this on the introduction, but tell us more about the niche that you guys are after because I think a lot of people listening to this have heard of VAs, right? A lot of like VA level
Mm-hmm.
talent offshore, but you're hiring marketing agency talent. That's your specific niche, right?
Yeah, so I think the VA is a term that we will never get past. I feel like it's okay. It doesn't bother me as much as it bothers some other people. But I think people think of VA as like I don't know, very small admin type work, and the types of people that we're hiring typically have 3 to 7 years experience doing very similar roles to people on marketing teams here internally, whether they work at like a startup or a tech company or at marketing agencies. So tech companies, growing startups are a great fit for us because they they need to hire someone fast, but they don't have the time to go recruit themselves, and they might not have the budget to go hire someone domestically for that role. And then marketing agencies, they always have a staffing utilization problem because the amount of people they need are is always dependent on the amount of clients they have. And I've heard the horror stories of people that like got locked into a big client and then that client left the agency and then they don't know what's going to happen next. But in most cases, what you find in agencies is they're scared to overhire, so their teams are way overworked. And when you can get someone to that's got like 3, 4, 5 years experience running paid ads or managing SEO or designing, editing videos, that's been vetted for your specific company, but they only cost 20 or 30% as a US hire, then especially as an agency, you have much more flexibility in how long you keep that person on because they're just a much lower burn on the company, no matter how many clients you have.
Well, I'm definitely gonna take notes for myself about RGP because I think the idea is brilliant. And when we need some marketing help, but we don't need that full-time person, we need the expertise without the full-time and without the US cost. That's pretty magical, especially given the level of experience and track record you have of in the recruiting space in general. So That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. But we're here today to help our listeners with their seven-figure journey. So let's talk about your own journey, whether in your previous startup experience or as you're building your company now, your own journey, trying to make that transition from scrappy, gritty founder who did everything, was involved in everything, now to trying to do more company building work that allows you to scale. And we want to talk specifically about a thing that you've learned that has helped you the most, that will help people who are listening. And then we'll transition to something you're currently wrestling with. And I hope to give you some help along those lines. And then by extension to our listeners, give them something as well. So let's start with something that's just been really impactful in your own journey as you're doing this seven-figure scaling thing.
Yeah, so I think like it makes sense that hiring is the thing that has been really impactful for me. So the backdrop there is that before starting RGP, I spent 8 years at one of the top sales recruitment firms for startups in the U.S. We were formerly called Closer IQ, now called Formative Search Partners, and I was the first employee there. And so my role evolved into basically everything over those 8 years. But I spent most of my time managing our client and recruiting teams, and then also overseeing our marketing as well. And the I was in this unique position where I was doing a lot of hiring for us internally, but also getting to see a bunch of other startups, 800 plus startups, hire and the mistakes and like great things that they did. And I have I have really centered everything I do around having a very intentional hiring process. I think this is a place that a lot of companies go wrong. They interview by feel. They have lots of overlap in their interview process, so it's very really inefficient. And they don't they don't spend much time planning every step of the interview process down to the every single question they're going to ask and how they're going to ask it and what the goal is of asking that specific question. And I think that's the reason you see so many people talking about how they've had bad interview experiences, why so many companies struggle to hire, and why recruiters have jobs, because it's tough. But I think if you can do it with a lot of intention and really break down every step of the process, then you can be really successful.
Let's try to give some practical ideas or tips for how to do that better. You referenced several things as you were describing being intentional, but knowing ahead of time what you're looking for is probably a good place to start. But
Yeah.
what have you learned in your experience? What have you seen business owners doing that gets them off the rails, or what do you see them the right ones or the successful ones doing that help them stay on track?
Yeah, so I think it starts with something I call qualification criteria, and that is as objectively as possible, listing out your needs to haves versus nice to haves for the role. And this can be, I think it actually doesn't even start with the experience they have, but it has to do with their abilities that you need them to be able to do. Because I mean, I'll tell, like I was a fired accountant. I spent time in big time accounting places, and then um, got fired and joined the startup sales world, and that's when my career started to take off. But I didn't have sales experience before that, and so I think it starts with um, really figuring out what you need this person to be able to do in this job and do really well, and then you start backing into, okay, what experience do I think maps to someone being able to do this well. And so once you have that picture together of the need to have qualification criteria and the nice to have, then I I just build out a simple table. I love using just simple tables because I think it's just easier to see things in a very linear fashion. And so once you figure out what you need to have, then you start to write down how can you test for it. And you don't even need to say where you're going to test for it in the interview process yet, but just figure out the skill set that the experience you're looking for. And so um, we're doing this right now with when we're hiring this marketing generalist role that is going to for an agency client. One of their things we're going to do is help them rethink some of their Instagram strategy. So we need someone obviously that understands Instagram really well, but we need to be able to test for this. So the first test that we're giving them is, hey, here's a client's Instagram feed. Tell us two things that are going well. Tell us two things that are going poorly, and give us two content ideas that that you think they should think about using. And so it's like a very practical example that shows us they have the skill set to do the thing, um, and gives us a sense for what their work output is actually like. And so I'll say, so real quick, we'll do that for every step of the process, including the specific interview questions we're going to ask.
Yeah, so you caught me trying to jump in there because I love where you started was like, let's get the success criteria first or the qualifications nailed. We know exactly what we're looking for. Then let's back into how we'll know whether or not they have that. And the example you gave of giving a test, like an experiential thing, something that they can show their capability, that's I mean, it seems obvious, but most of us skip that kind of stuff, and we just go off of an interview and kind of cross our fingers that what we read on a piece of paper or what we heard in an interview is actually going to translate to knowing how to do the work.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I've fallen in love with candidates on resumes before, and it's certainly given me biases in my hiring. And when I look back to all the people I've hired in the past, the like what was on their resume or their past experience um, was way less indicative of their success compared to how they did in our exercises, how proactive they were as a communicator, um, how then if you need a role, then if you start to get to roles that need experience, the types of interview questions you should be asking are not nearly as many of like, tell me about your experience doing this in the past, but hey, this is a problem that we're trying to solve right now. How would you think about that?
Mm,
Because you want to know that they have frameworks because they've done this a million times before. So if you're hiring a video editor, ask them about what their editing process is like. And if they can't tell you step by step what happens once they get the footage from a client till when they deliver the edits and then revisions, then they just might not be the right fit because, or at least they might have to manage a lot more than someone else that already has a framework built out like that because they've done it a million times.
yeah, great insights. Okay, so respond to one more thing for me on behalf of our listeners, because I know I know what they're thinking. A lot of them are thinking, but like I'm things are burning right now. I need somebody today. And so I needed them yesterday or a month ago, and I'm finally getting a posting up. And so I just grab a posting from LinkedIn or whatever job board is out there that has a similar job title. And I look through it and say, yeah, okay, that's it. And I post it and kind of cross my fingers. And here come the applicants. Um, this what you're saying sounds like it slows everything down. Why would I go through all of that slowdown when I needed somebody yesterday?
Because it's going to cost you a lot more in the long run to make a bad hire. I mean, we've probably all been there, especially people that might be listening to this, where you made bad hires, and there are studies out there about what it actually costs. I just say it's kind of incalculable, right? Because as soon as you have someone that you know is not a good fit, it drags on you mentally. It drags on other people in your company, and it's just impossible to actually like calculate the full cost of all this stuff. And I think, and I've seen many startups fail by trying to hire too fast and lowering their bar. And I've done that myself, where like we need someone to see like they seem pretty good enough, like we can justify why they've got high potential, and it doesn't work out. The bet isn't worth it, and so you're better off just gritting your teeth and dealing with the extra work that you're going to have to put in, which I mean, as entrepreneurs, right, is kind of our choice that we're selecting for, and being patient to find the right person. Because once you do find that right person, like they will unlock so much leverage for you, and they will be so additive to the business that you'll never regret taking that extra time to find them.
Yeah, well said. I just wanted to hear you put it in your words, and you said it really well. But I couldn't agree more. And I like the way that you talked about the cost of a bad hire is incalculable, right? Like how can you actually know? I actually asked an audience one time, what did it cost you your worst hire? And I had people saying hundreds of thousands. I had somebody say 1.5 million, right? Like they put dollar amounts to it. But the most memorable one for me, the response was 5 years of my life, right? That feels like incalculable, like you said. Like there's so much to it and it's so painful. So take the time, slow down, do what Jason's talking about because he knows he's done this for years and years and years, and it's a competitive advantage for him in his offshoring business because he recruits at a level that other people don't, and because of that you're going to get great team members who are helping you. So get clear on who you're looking for and then figure out what does it take for me to assess whether or not they're the right fit. I love the tests or the exercises, really hands-on, show me what you can do. We're not just going to talk about it. I'm going to evaluate your performance through this little exercise. Genius stuff. Thank you for that, Jason. Now, let's
It
transition. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're still in this. You're in the trenches. You're in this scaling thing. You're trying to figure it out. What's been a big challenge that you're dealing with now that we could talk about together? Maybe I can give you some ideas that would help others who are going through something similar.
Yeah, I think that so. Um, I'm glad we're going through this because it's something that is I think harder when you are in it than versus when you're out of it and you can see the problem sometimes more clearly.
Yeah.
And so for us, one of the big unlocks last year was I need to get out of the day to day client management of things, and I was able to find a couple amazing account managers in kind of Q3 Q4, and that took a lot off my plate. And then the focus has shifted from client delivery to improving our own operations internally and um, improving how we can kind of scale the sales function and the go to market function. And so there's been a couple things kind of on like I'd say my own delegation or business ops side that I've become the bottleneck for. And so one is this landing page project where we're building out some new landing pages for different roles that we are really suited to hire for. And it should be something like with the dedicated focus and energy. I know this only should have taken us like 2 or 3 weeks. 2 months later, and it's still not done yet. Um, so that's certainly one of them. Um, and then I think there's um, some other things around being able to scale uh, scale things that are kind of stuck in my head um, to our other team members so that they can take those and run them as fast as possible.
Okay. I love both of those challenges, and they're not unique to you, and you know that, Jason. We all go through those types of things. But I think there's a conversation we can have that would bring both of those things together, actually. So that's kind of fun. So, how do you not be the bottleneck? Is We'll generally characterize your first thing as that, right? How do I not be the bottleneck on things that shouldn't take so much time, but they end up taking more time than they should? I don't get to them. I don't get them off my list. And then the other one of how do I get my vision or views of where we're going out of my head and help the other team come along with that. So love both those concepts. It's something we all struggle with. What I want to frame it this way, and I'm glad we talked about this in the hiring process. You're like somebody who's been through this a million times. They're going to have a way. So I have a way. So that's good news. Apparently I know what I'm doing. But the way is this, and I'm going to frame it with the challenge that we all have. There's working on the business work that we want to be doing, and there's working in the business work that we get pulled into constantly, right? Business is chaotic. Every day is coming at us. We're getting pulled into the here and now, the things that need response now. So that's constantly happening for us. And all of us need to figure out rhythms for breaking out of that day to day thing. And so I think it applies to both the things you were talking about because on the one hand, you had the landing pages that you wanted to get done. You're like, this should take 2 or 3 weeks. A couple months later, it's not quite done yet. Well, that's because our working on the business rhythms aren't quite strong enough to overpower the day to day pull that you have towards other things. So, for example, if you have, let's say you have a weekly team meeting where you get together and you say, okay, here's what everybody's focus is this week. Everybody kind of knows what their operational focus is, but are you including also the move the business forward things in that focus every week? And in connection with that focus, are you creating time? Are you carving out time in your calendar that's just dedicated time? I'm not talking about the time that we intend, like maybe I'll do it in this time. I'm talking about time that we dedicate completely to that activity because guaranteed there will be outside forces competing for that time. Just recently, I had a situation maybe similar to yours where I'm still involved more than I want to be on the client acquisition side of things. And so if I want our business to grow, I have to spend time regularly in certain activities. Well, I was blocking it out on my calendar. here's, I'll call it sales time, generally speaking, right? Here's sales time on my calendar. But then, I meet Jason Lalk, and I say, Jason, let's do a podcast. He says, yes, let's do it. And I'm like, I don't have any time on my calendar. Oh, I'll just put it in the sales time here. And now Jason and I are going to do our podcast there. Well, by choosing to do the podcast, I've chosen not to do the sales activity, and that gets pushed down the road a little bit longer. So my sense is that that 2 to 3 week thing that would make so much difference to the future of your business is getting supplanted, or getting pushed aside by here and now types of things that crop up, and we all make these compromises all day long, so it's not just you. Let me pause there and ask if any of that was helpful, Jason, before I move to the second item.
Yeah, it was, and I think it's some good reminders in there. I'm curious, do you have, because I think I'm doing a decent job in like the one-on-one meetings, keeping people informed about this stuff, but I am not probably doing a great job of structured communication around that stuff
Mm,
to my core team, where I could easily, and I've done stuff like this in the past, but I could easily write like um, a weekly memo of like, hey, here are the main focuses for this week and the things that are up and coming. Here's where I think um, things might go astray a bit, or where like things could get more intense. But I'm curious, how do you kind of formalize that communication yourself? And then I guess the follow up to that too, in terms of honoring those time slots on your calendar. What have you found works best for you?
yeah, great question. So let me try to bridge in answering that question. Let me try to bridge back to the other issue you had, which is kind of like I got stuff in my head, but it doesn't always get out to the team. um, in every business, there's a maturing point. Usually happens in the 1 to 3 million range, where the informal communication that we used to do, just we're all in the trenches together and we're making it happen, that becomes insufficient to keep the right amount of focus on the working on the business and the in the business deliverables that we need to do today. So I would say the key lies in creating the right meeting rhythm for where your business is at, and it needs to include at a minimum some sort of annual planning for the year. Like, what's our priority focus for the year to move the business forward, not just to deliver today's results, because we have a machine today that already creates a certain level of results, but we want to do more and we set goals around that. But what's the work that moves the business forward? What's the capability building work that moves it forward? In the example you gave earlier of, oh man, these landing pages, this project, you called it a project. If we just got these landing pages done, it would significantly improve our ability to do the revenue acquisition work we want to do, or the client acquisition work. So that's not today's work, that's building capability for tomorrow while we're still doing today. But without a good meeting rhythm, we always default back to what pulls at our attention, and that's the day-to-day stuff. So I would say, if you have an annual plan where you identify priorities for the year, and then you have supporting quarterly plans that's that are lined up to that annual set of priorities, and this is work that you do with your team. So we're going to solve that problem with, like, I got stuff in my head, it doesn't always get out to my team. If and so that's working on the business kind of stuff, annual and quarterly planning. And then with a good weekly meeting will allow you to do a little bit of a balancing act here, because working on the business is annual and quarterly planning and making sure that the team together is clear on priorities. And then the weekly stuff is going to be really heavy on today's operation, but we're going to supplement that with a little bit of how are we doing on our quarterly progress. So we don't have time in a podcast like this to really break all that down, but you need a good meeting rhythm that allows you to spend enough time on the business building work while we're delivering today's results. That's kind of the punchline there. And then to your question about, man, when I dedicate time on my calendar, and then I sort of cheat and I let myself change it out for something else because it feels more pressing, right? It's like, but I got to do this thing. I'm not saying that you're never going to change a plan on your calendar. That's going to happen from time to time. But if you will share your commitments with your team and they do the same with you, you start to build an internal accountability to one another, where you're increasingly able to be your word. Like I commit to myself that I'm going to use this time for this. I'm telling my team members because it helps to have some outside accountability to that. And it doesn't mean that they have to view everything you put on your calendar, but it does mean that if you commit to 10 hours a week of certain levels of activity, that you could report back to them the next week how much time you actually spent on that. I said I was going to do 10. I came in at 10.5. I feel great about that. Or I said I was going to do 10. This other thing came up and I made a choice. I came in at I don't, looking back, I probably should not have made that choice. Or looking back, I was I did 8 this week. We're behind a little bit because of it. And maybe I worked on a Saturday evening after the kids went to bed to make sure that I got that done. So we don't want to put all possible things on that list of things we could be doing this week. We want to just narrow in on these are the critical things to move the business forward or to drive key short-term results. Here's what I'm committing to this week. And that level of routine and discipline will do a lot for you and your team to move performance forward.
Yeah, I think the kind of that public sharing with your team of those commitments can be a really good accountability measure.
And it's you modeling for them the way that you want them
Yeah.
behaving with themselves and each other, right? You want them being their word. You want them being intentional. You want them telling others, here I'm calling my shot. Here's what I'm going to do. I commit to doing this week. And then you report back to close that loop and say, I was my word. And now your confidence increases in your own ability to be your word because you were your word, and the trust from the team increases because you're like, Jason said he was going to do this and he did it. And so when Jason tells me something, I can believe that, right? So there's also some trust building that's going on as you go through that process.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
Very
well,
cool. Yeah, I appreciate that.
it,
Thank you.
it takes a lot of courage to be open about something that you're struggling with. Thank you for demonstrating that courage, because hopefully it helped you today, but it also helps others who are going through similar things. Anything else you want to leave our listeners with, Jason? If they want to learn about RGP, please direct them. If they want to connect with you on social, how would they do that?
Yeah, remotegrowthpartners.com. A bit of a mouthful, but straightforward. And yeah, if we have a very no pressure sales process, we only bring on clients that we think we're going to be a really good fit for. So if you're curious and you want to learn more, just let me know. I'm happy to share everything I know about this space with you. And if you want to find me on social, I've got a decent little following on LinkedIn, growing Twitter slowly, but the type of stuff I share are typically around entrepreneurship and lessons I've learned around hiring and from other marketing leaders because that's kind of the space that we're in. So if any of that stuff interests you, feel free to come check it out.
Well, we can include those kinds of links in our show notes, but for people who are just listening, how would they find you on LinkedIn?
Just Jason Lalk, Lalk. You can find me there, and same exact thing on Twitter. I try to keep it straightforward.
Yeah,
I'm not too clever, just straightforward. My belief in basically all things copy and explanation. So
yeah.
try to have
Lock,
that in my socials as well.
Lock, L A L
Yep.
K. Yeah.
Lalk.
All
Yep.
right. Jason Locke. All right. Well, Jason, you've been a great guest. Thank you for being a guest. For everybody out there who's listening, please share, like, review, do all those things so that we can help as many seven-figure business owners as possible who are going through the same types of things here. That's what this show is all about. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.